Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grounded Wildness. I'm thrilled here today to have Sara Letourneau with us on another interview type podcast for Grounded Wildness. I'm going to start by reading her bio so you know a little bit more about her, and then we're going to dive into a really fun conversation today that's going to be partly about the rules that we're handed, but also about writing, because Sara happens to be the copy editor of Grounded Wildness, but even more importantly, she is a poet in her own name and a writing coach and does all sorts of fun things. So this is going to be a conversation about creativity and rules and beauty, and oh my gosh, we're gonna dive into it and it's going to be good. So here I'm going to read Sara's bio. Sara Letourneau is the book editor, writing coach, and workshop instructor at Heart of the Story Editorial and Coaching Services. She works with authors and writers to help them develop the skills, knowledge, and confidence they need so they can finish their manuscripts, polish them for publication, and stay focused and motivated as they reach for their writing goals and embrace their creativity. I love that second part there. Her authors have gone on to become #1 Amazon bestsellers and be recognized for awards such as the Eric Hoffer Book Awards, the North Street Book Prize, and the Book Life Nonfiction Prize. Sara is also an award-winning poet and the co-founder of the Pour Me a Poem open mic in Mansfield, Massachusetts. Her debut poetry collection, Wild Gardens, will be published by Kelsey Books in 2024. She also, like I said before, is the copy editor of Grounded Wildness. So I'm thrilled to have her here. So she's read all of Grounded Wildness, but she is a writer and a poet, and I had the opportunity to read some of her poems prior to recording this, and they are beautiful and gorgeous and hit me really deeply. So we're going to discuss one in a little bit more detail and have you all hear it as well, but we'll put in some links so you can read some other ones, because I have no doubt that anyone listening to this will also be hit in a very good way deeply by some of her poetry as well. So welcome, Sara. I'm so thrilled to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Heather. I'm really happy to be here too.
Good. Well, I got your official bio out into the world here, so everyone knows a little bit about you, but it's also nice to hear a little bit more about you as just a regular human person. So would you like to tell us a little bit more about you in real life? Who is Sara?
Yeah, it's funny because when I was thinking about that question, knowing that you were going to be asking, it was like, it's so hard because I think as a business owner, you sort of start to identify so much with the main parts of what you do, like book editor, writing coach, poet, that it's like, wait, what else am I? What else? But yes, I mean, I'm a girlfriend, I'm a daughter, a sister, a friend. This is probably going to come as no surprise, but I'm an avid reader. The last book I finished was a space opera called, and now I have to forget the title of it.
A
Come
space
on.
a space opera?
It's a science fiction novel taking place
Okay.
totally in space.
That's all right.
The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet
Wow, that's a good
by
title.
Becky Chambers, and I'm currently reading a very different book, nonfiction, Pandora's Jar by Natalie Haynes, who is a an expert on women in Greek mythology.
Oh, cool.
And apart from that, I'm a nature lover. I think that probably comes as no surprise to you, Heather. But yes, I love going outside for walks or hiking the trails through wildlife sanctuaries, or just simply being outside. I'm not a real outdoorsy person, but I value nature, and it has brought just so much comfort and peace into my life. And so I've also become more aware of a lot of the challenges that the natural world is unfortunately facing because of the climate crisis and things that we humans are unfortunately doing to the natural world. Um, I love traveling, so I guess you could say I'm a world traveler. I've only been to a few other countries in Europe so far, but I I love visiting other places and just kind of immersing myself in their culture, trying their foods, and just sort of being there and soaking it all up. Um, and I'm also, I don't know how to describe this more succinctly, but I'm someone who has been on a growth and healing journey for probably the better part of a decade.
Yeah.
You know, that I think it was 2012 that I started going that I went to therapy for a year and a half for depression. And out of that came I started doing a gratitude practice every day. And that led to all other things like getting my first you know, I get right I get Reiki done regularly.
Yeah.
I had my first tarot card reading and holy cow, it was accurate. And but it's led to other me discovering other healing modalities and
Yeah.
other um things that in some ways have, I wouldn't say they've caused me to question the rules, but they've encouraged me to go deeper within myself to continue healing in ways that I probably wasn't aware of 10 years ago. That's probably the best way to describe that. But yeah,
I love that. Yeah, I
yes.
love what you said. It sounded like you started out in a more traditional healing format, which is beautiful and good, and
Mm-hmm.
you've discovered more things along the way that also work for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that. So let's dive in a little bit more both to that and kind of the rules as a whole and your healing journey. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
when you look back, I like to ask people, you know, looking back kind of over the course of their life, and then we'll see where this goes. What rules were you handed in your life, whether that was early rules in family or from community or from work experiences or anything that you have needed to unravel? And maybe that relates to your healing journey or maybe not. I don't know. Anyone who listening, Sarah and I did not like in-depth prep all of exactly exactly what she was going to say ahead of time. So tell me, like, what rules were you handed, and does that correspond at all to your healing journey?
And I think it has in different ways. One of the rules that I've had to unravel is I have to do things perfectly.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, it was one of those rules, and I think a number of the rules that were passed down to me were not necessarily told or spoken to me because of beliefs or criticisms that people shared
Mhm.
directly with me. I think it was a lot of it was through osmosis, through the behaviors of certain members of my family and elders and whatnot. But perfectionism, very much so. I mean, one could say that as an editor that you need to be perfectionist. Um,
That thought
and I
actually came
agree,
to mind when you
and
said when
I
you said
and I
that.
I agree to that only to a certain point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between having the eye for detail and being able to pick up on the errors, and then being so rigid about things that you're not open to alternatives or no
Mhm.
other way of doing things. It has to be this way. Or, I have to make sure I catch all the things before I send off the manuscript. I mean, I know I do a very good job of that. Um, but there comes a certain point where, and I think working as an editor has helped me with this. There
Mhm.
comes a certain point where you have to let it go because you have deadlines. You can't just keep working on the thing, and you have other things to do. Maybe other projects to work on, or in my case, maybe I may have a coaching call that I have to prepare for, or you got to think about the other things that are part of being. So you can't just be an editor all the time. You can't just edit
Yeah.
and make sure things are perfect. You gotta, and so as I said, I feel like my working as an editor has actually helped me let go of that to a degree.
Yeah.
Because you have to turn the project back over to the author eventually. And but yeah, I mean, I think there have been other areas in my life too where my perfectionism came out. I know it came out a lot when I was younger when I was a student because I had to get good grades and I had
Yeah.
to do really, really well. And I think part of me wanted to do genuinely well, but there was also, and I this is drawing a little bit also from something in the book,
Mhm.
um, I also felt the need to please people.
Yeah.
Mm. And, because I think, and part of it may have been maybe getting the rare, not so great grade in the past and being told you need to do better than this,
Yeah.
and then making sure that I did better than that. Um, but it also but sometimes it got to a point um, where I was just putting so much stress on myself to be, to do well all the time, or to be present myself in a certain
Yeah.
way. And that gets very confining and stressful
Mhm.
over time. And so, yeah, that's perfectionism, definitely one of the rules. And another one, which is going to connect to something we're going to talk about in a little bit,
Yeah.
is I had a lot of trouble seeing myself as beautiful
Mm.
as I am. Again, I can't remember anybody's telling me when I was little that I was ugly. In
Yeah.
fact, I know for a fact that was opposite. A lot of people, a lot of my relatives and my parents told me how pretty and beautiful I was. But I think, again, because I heard the adults in my life say how ugly they were, or, comment negatively about their appearance for a long time, that's what stuck in my brain more than
Mhm.
their compliments to me.
Yeah.
And so, and then of course it also didn't help that as a teenager I had things like braces,
Right.
glasses, and all those things that really wreak havoc in a teenager's head regarding their
Yeah.
appearance, because especially when their peers make fun of them for it.
Mhm.
And so, even when the braces came off, and probably, yes, and then in my teenage years when I started wearing contacts, um, those feelings still lingered.
Yeah.
It really didn't matter that I had, that things in my appearance had changed and I perhaps looked more attractive in my opinion. It took such a long, long time for me to really start to see myself
Yeah.
as what I really
Beautiful.
am, and that's beautiful.
Yeah. There's so many really wonderful things in what you're saying. A couple of things that really stick out to me that I'm so glad you brought up. One, with both the perfectionism and the beauty or how you saw yourself piece, you said like it wasn't like any one person or group of people was like, you have to be perfect, or you are ugly, or you need to change your way you look in some way. Like no one
Hmm.
directly said that, but yet there was still this osmosis from the people around you. I think for me, that was for sure true as well. Like it
Hmm.
wasn't like anyone ever directly told me that. And I would say for me, it was even just bigger, broader cultural messages, and
Yeah.
certainly people who are around me too, but even more so just kind of general big messages about, well, this is the way you're supposed to look, this is how hard you're supposed to work, this is, we're praising you for being the good student and being
Hmm.
smart and being a leader and doing well. So like, okay, if that's what I'm getting praised for, keep doing it, and like
Hmm.
do it till you drive yourself into the ground, you know.
Hmm. Yeah.
So I like
And
how you
that's
like, yeah, the combo there with people pleasing too. Yeah.
yeah, and that's the thing that that one of the things, in addition to my grades, that my teachers frequently commented on was
Yeah.
my work ethic. And
Mm,
especially when I was younger, I mean, I worked my butt off in school. I mean, in some areas I naturally did very well, like with
mhm,
English, or I did really well with Spanish. For some reason, for learning foreign languages or ASL,
mhm.
also that just came really naturally to me. Math, science, forget it. I needed help. Those are the only reasons why I did well in those
Yeah.
classes, was because those were the times where I had to stay after. That was, or ask for help from my dad, who is, an was an engineer. He's been retired for several years now, but those were his strong points.
Yeah.
And or my friends had whose strengths were in those classes and
Mhm.
not mine. So and it sort of and then that carried over into the corporate world, because I did work in the corporate world for over a decade before starting my
Oh,
own business. And in that culture too, especially with the in particular employer I was working with for the most time, um, working long hours, especially at the very last minute, was almost encouraged or
yeah.
expected. And I remember there came a point then where after there was one time where I worked probably for one particular project, I worked 60 hours a week, 50 to 60 hours a week for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
After that, I said, I am not working overtime for anybody anymore.
Yeah. Good for you.
And because I was just I mean, my boss was nice enough at the time where she actually allowed me to take a couple days off from work after the
Mhm.
project was over so I could just chill out and relax. But it was during that time that I said, nope,
Yeah.
not doing that anymore. Not
Yeah.
doing that anymore. And so I think that was one of the big turning points for me in terms
Mhm.
of learning to set better boundaries and to start taking better care of myself. So though that would still take a while for that to really sink in.
Yeah.
But yeah, there comes a point with working hard where you do have to stop and
Yeah.
take care of yourself.
Yeah. For you, because I feel like people probably want to hear a little bit of the how. And I'm very curious as well when you had that realization of like, I'm not doing this again. Like I am not going on crazy for, extended periods of time. Um, how did you I mean, you had the realization for yourself, but you were still working for a company. So like how did you, whether it was having the conversation, whether it was setting boundaries, like how did you do that in real life after that realization?
Um, I think the good thing about it was that did not come up very much again after that.
Okay.
Partly because some of the employer started experiencing some business struggles, which are
Mm,
outside the realm of this conversation.
yes.
And so that really didn't happen a whole lot anymore. But the couple times that it did, I just started saying, this is when I end work and I'm not available after that. Or I don't work on the week. I'm not going to be available over the weekend to work.
I
And
love it.
I just left it at that.
I love it. What was the
And
reaction when you did that?
they were like, uh they didn't really know how to react. I think,
Yeah.
even now, my boyfriend still works for the same employer, and he doesn't run into that very much either, but he recently did. And and he did put in a little bit of extra time.
Mhm.
um but it ended up working out for him. But yeah, it's not easy, but sometimes all you can really do is just say, be very simple about your
Mhm.
terms, don't go into detail, and just leave it at that.
I
And just don't budge.
I'm loving this so much because I mean, even I can look back, not even look back. I'm like, look back like last week. Like I will even sometimes now, and I'm way better at setting boundaries than I used to be.
Hmm.
And I still feel the need to provide an explanation, which sometimes makes sense. Like sometimes I think that makes sense. But I
Hmm.
love when you're just like, I am not available to work on the weekends.
Yeah.
Done. Like that is, and even if people like are questioning it or don't know how to
Hmm.
react, like I'm hearing that it worked out okay. It
It did.
wasn't,
It did. It did.
yeah.
It did work out okay in the end. And I think one of the nice things of having my own business now and just being fully self-employed is now that's completely what I practice now in terms of my schedule is I set my hours, and
Mhm.
this is and because I even now, it's still not healthy to work late all the time or to work weekends all the time, especially because my boyfriend and I, we have a little bit of a long distance relationship. He lives just over the border in New Hampshire and I'm in Massachusetts. And so weekends are often the times where we spend time together. And so, I'm at a point right now in my business where I really try not to do anything on the weekends because that's my personal time. And so it's nice that we have things like scheduling links where we can
Hmm.
pre-program in our time in terms of when we can do calls and so that people know that's when we're available and so that we don't feel the obligation of having to work outside of that.
Yeah. And I think, for anyone listening, this just goes to those boundaries. And yes, like Sara and I are both entrepreneurs and we both worked in regular jobs. And it's not, neither one are easy. And they both have their different, my personal experience is that they both have their different challenges. They're actually pretty, I think, pretty similar and an easy, hard kind of spectrum. They're just
Hmm.
different.
Yeah.
And also, like, are there structures you can put in place, like blocking your calendar? But I really think, Sara, what you said, just like know your terms and be simple and be direct is probably the biggest takeaway. And even if you are an entrepreneur, doing that with yourself, like I'm in a place right now with the book launch has been busy and it's been so much fun. Like it's been great. And I also know, so Sara and I are recording this in like the second week in November. Thanksgiving is coming soon. And I'm like, I really need that break. And I need to really look at my boundaries again because for during the book launch, they've gotten real squishy. And I'm okay with that for a short amount of time. But it's really easy for me, at least, to go back into that habit of like, oh, I'll just check email there. Oh, I'll just do a little work on the weekends. And I know I need to take stock again that week of Thanksgiving and be like, okay, let's get back to what I want to be normal. This past
Hmm.
6 weeks has not been normal. And that's okay for a short amount of time. I'm totally fine with that. And I don't want it to become a new normal that I have to, 4 months from now, be like, oh, wait, now I'm exhausted. I need to
Hmm.
take stock again. So I love that you said that. Simple terms, simple terms and be clear. So that's so
Hmm.
good. I'm going to move us forward because I want to make sure that we have time to hear your poem and talk about it. So just everyone listening, a little bit of background. Sara sent me some of her poems ahead of time and I read all of them. And there were two in particular that like really jumped out at me. So I was like, Sara, would you be willing to read one of them? And so we decided on one. It's called In the Bath. And as Sara mentioned before, it gets to this whole piece around beauty and recognizing our own bodies and beauty. So she's going to read it. It's really beautiful. I have no doubt that it will resonate with you who are listening. And then we're going to talk a little bit about it. So Sara, I'm going to hand it over to you to read that poem.
All right. So this is In the Bath. Here, in the hotel bathtub, I am resting in water scented with coconut shampoo and Arctic thyme bath salts, rinsing myself in solitude, a river of reveling. My boyfriend has already washed my hair and my body, but that is not why I feel cleaner and newborn. Here, in this bathtub, I marvel at myself for the first time as an adult. Smooth, uncalloused feet with toenails painted the purple of orchids. The thighs I've called thick and flabby, now weightless. My stomach softly sloping, a meadow of skin inclining toward the hills of my breasts. Slender arms with hands that hold love and fingers that give back. Now they wave from side to side so that gentle tides are slapping against porcelain, splashing my face, rippling, whispering. Here in the bathtub, I let my body rise to the surface, let my old fetal self unfurl my limbs and neck so my new eyes and freshened mind can see me as I glisten, as I glow. Here, a dam I never knew I had built bursts inside, and thoughts of blemishes, scars, spidering veins are swept out to sea as I caress this precious vessel that carries me.
Mm, thank you.
You're welcome.
Even though I'd read it before, there's something, well, I think there's something about hearing the author read it themselves, but also when you said that dam burst that you didn't even know was there, those weren't the exact words, but ooh, I felt that really deeply. I think that I'm gonna have to look more into that for myself. I think that, yeah. So I'm curious in your word, your casual words, what brought on writing that poem?
Um, Personal experience, basically. I was my boyfriend and I had taken a trip to Iceland, and it was the we weren't in a hotel. I think it was more or less a suite. It was a house on one of the streets in downtown Reykjavik that had been renovated into just having a bunch of different suites in it. And so we were in our suite one night, and it had this big, the bathroom had this big tub. And I forget whose idea it was, but I decided to do a soaking bath. And after, like my boyfriend washed my hair, and after that was done, he walked out and, gave me some alone time. And it came from that, because I'm just sitting there in the tub, lying in the water, just sort of just enjoying this quiet moment to myself, and also being fully cognizant of the fact that I'm here in all my glory, no clothes on. It's just me. And it really was the first time as an adult that I just looked at myself and I was like, this is me. I'm floating in the water. And it was, I don't want to say it was autobiographical, but it,
Yeah.
it kind of was.
Yeah. It sounds like when you just said that, and you can feel free to disagree with me, it sounds like it was a moment of just total acceptance.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And you said earlier, growing up that you had wondered or thought like, am I beautiful? Am I ugly? All those questions that I think almost all of us ask ourselves. I know this was probably a 20-year journey. We don't need to get into all every single detail, but in general, like, what do you think brought you to that moment of recognizing, accepting yourself, your own beauty from, what was a bit about that journey from childhood, teen years to that moment?
I mean, for a long time, I didn't like the way I looked. I mean, I was not the kind of person who ever entertained things like plastic surgery, and
Mhm.
because that just doesn't feel right at all. But I just wasn't happy with how I looked, and yet at the same time, it's like there's nothing I would really want to do differently,
Mhm.
you know. And so it was kind of that weird combination of the two for a very long time. And, I'm not saying that in order to see yourself as more beautiful, you have to find somebody who can help facilitate that journey. But I think to a degree, my boyfriend kind of has helped out with that,
Yeah.
because I mean, if you were to meet him in person, I mean, he would tell you he thinks I'm the most gorgeous woman on the planet. And um and I laugh just because I know him well enough to know that that would be his answer.
Yeah.
It's not, I'm not laughing at myself, but I think enough times he heard me say things about how I looked that he started saying, I wish you could see yourself the way I see you. And the funny thing and Heather, I think this might have been one of the other poems you read. We don't have to read it, but the In the Bath was published in the same journal at the same time as another poem called
Mhm.
Self-Portrait of the Poet Looking at a Photo of Herself.
Mhm.
And I purposely wrote that poem. I mean, that's also autobiographical to a degree, but I purposely wrote that poem with that quote from my boyfriend in mind. I wish you could see yourself the way I see you. And I think between my time in the bath and the writing those two poems helped to create that shift in my brain.
Ooh. So the actual writing helped create the shift as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. I think that's certainly been my experience as well, as things come up. And not only is it healing to write, the new things come up, and it solidifies things, I think too. It's like
Mm-hmm.
you're writing things into truth as you write them. And it's like, oh
Mm-hmm.
wait, this is real. This is
Yeah.
true. This is how I
Yeah.
feel. This is yeah. And somehow putting it into words, whether you end up sharing those or not, or just for yourself. I don't think this is about being published. It's about writing it in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, it
yeah.
absolutely is. I mean, and I'm 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 in the process now of writing more poems. I mean, we are at the point, again, as Heather said, this is the second week of November, where last week I just submitted the final version of my manuscript to Kelsey Books. So all my work on it until it's time to start looking at the proofs and whatnot next year, my work on that book is done now. And so now I'm, writing poems for what will probably be book two or other books beyond it. And some other things that are perhaps outside the scope of this conversation as well, are starting to come up. Again, it's part of where I am in my healing journey and growth journey right now. And I'm being open to it. I'm allowing myself to write it. I actually read one of those poems at an open mic um, just a couple days ago and got some really incredible feedback on it. And yeah, I'm just gonna allow things to just take the journey that they need to take and
Yes.
not force anything.
Oh, yeah, that
Yeah. Yeah, which
that
that's a
is a
whole other
lesson.
that's
It
that's
is.
a whole other conversation too. But yeah.
It is letting things emerge. There's a section in Grounded Wildness called Letting Things Emerge. And it's fresh in my mind because my Colorado book launch is tonight. I'm doing 2 readings from the book. Mostly it's about fun, but I'm doing 2 readings in the book. And one of the readings I'm doing is the section on letting things emerge,
Hmm.
instead of, and I will also say, I fully believe that. And I have to remind myself of what you said, like letting things emerge instead of forcing them. It's
Yeah.
like, it's a balance, I think. And
Hmm.
I think I'm still figuring out this balance of moving, moving towards the things I desire,
Hmm.
doing the actions, putting myself out there,
Hmm.
reaching out to people, writing, so all of the kind of actions, but without the forcing. And sometimes
Hmm.
I think I'm there a good portion of the time, and then I'll catch
Hmm.
myself in the
Yeah.
forcing, and it's like, oh
Yeah.
wait, no, I don't actually want to bring that energy. I don't want
Yeah.
to bring the forcing energy to anything. I want to trust. I want to
Yeah.
trust, and if things don't work, like,
Hmm.
change course. I don't think it's for me. Yeah, I've had some lessons lately in my business of like, oh, I do need to do some different things. And that's
Hmm.
okay. I still don't have to force them. Like, I can change course, I can do different things without
Yeah.
that forcing energy. So
Yeah.
I love that you brought that
Yeah.
forward.
One of the ways I look at it is, especially if there's a hard conversation I may need to have with, particularly with certain family members.
Yeah.
I don't sometimes if it's too hard for me to think about, okay, I know I need to have this conversation, but the thought of initiating the conversation gives me would start creating anxiety for me.
Yeah.
And so I said, okay, I give it up to the universe. I know that we need to talk about this at some point, and it's not going to serve me to force it. And so, universe, I give it up to you. You tell me when it's time. You tell me when I need to walk through the door. And that's how I look at it, is seeing the door when it opens and then walking through it. And I've learned specifically in those instances when to recognize, I recognize them, and it's like, okay, you ask about this, I'm walking through the door, here's what you want to know, and there's the conversation. And 99 times out of 100, it ends up playing out much more smoothly than I was concerned it would be.
Yeah, I love that. I love that idea of looking for when the door opens, because sometimes doors open and you're like, no, I don't want to go through that door. I'm gonna, or I asked for this, but I'm gonna ignore that door. That door is scary, even if it's open, even if it's something I want, it's scary or whatever. And so you kind of putting that intention out there of like, I'm gonna wait. I'm not gonna force it. I'm gonna wait till I sense an open door. And then I'm going to also walk through it, and I'm going to do the thing, even if it's hard in the moment. I love that. That's so good. All right. I want to be cognizant of time here. I personally have one final question for you, but I want to ask you, is there anything we haven't talked about that you wanted to bring up today?
I do want to bring up one thing,
Yeah.
because one of the cool things about being, or at least in my experience as a book editor, is you never know what you can learn from your authors, specifically the books that you work on for them.
Yeah.
And so, like, because your book is one of the ones that I keep going back to as an example of this. And it's specifically the part about I don't remember what chapter it was. As I said, I was reading the last version of the copy edited manuscript last night just to sort of refresh my memory. But it was the part about, I think you were sharing your examples of breaking free so that you were starting to get back to grounded wildness. And this had to do with, it was the story having to do with your business. And the idea of, you don't have to do what experts tell you have to do regarding your business. And I read that and I just thought, I don't think anybody can see me right now, but I
Yeah.
just raised my hands up in the air like victory.
Yes.
Because, I think that has been one of the things that I have struggled with, is as a business owner from time to time, there's all this advice out there about how to run a business, or specifically like what book editors or writing coaches can do. And especially when it comes to things like social media and having a consistent social media presence, and, doing this or doing that, or, using Canva, and I cannot tell you how many times I have tried to keep a consistent social media schedule, and to do the things like sharing writing tips and doing this and doing that, and doing all the things that the experts say that you should do for social media. I even had a content power hour with a social media consultant about a year ago to try to sort of help with things.
Yeah.
And I don't really in the end, I ended up getting the same stuff that I'd been hearing over and over. And she was basically just saying, just keep doing it, and eventually it's going to work. It's never worked for me.
Yeah.
And especially because, and I've always found that the posts that I put out there that are like other people, like other editors, or like other book coaches posts, they don't do as well. And so
Yes.
it's like, you know what? Okay. I'm at the I'm still figuring out what's the best way for that to work for me, but I don't put a lot of pressure on myself. In fact, most of the authors I work with don't even find me through social media. They come from other places. And but at some point I know I will find a way that's perhaps different from what other people do on social media that works for me and my business. And you know what? I'm okay with that.
I love that you brought that up, because yeah, that was a huge journey for me as well, of like, what can I learn from people, but not just do everything that they say. And with social media is such a good example. Like I principally use one platform because it's the one that works for me. And then, which is LinkedIn. And then Instagram is kind of like an afterthought, but sometimes I check it every day and sometimes I'll go like a month without doing anything on it. And it's interesting to me too, when you said like, the things that I'm quote unquote supposed to post don't really resonate with people. I have found the exact same thing, even just in the last 2 weeks. It's fascinating to me. I posted this really fun picture and story about unexpectedly giving a copy of Grounded Wildness away to someone on a hiking trail who had taken a picture of me. And it was just a really fun, I wasn't planning to do it. It was really fun. So I told the story and showed the picture and people loved it. Oh my gosh, like they resonated with it. They were excited about it. And then just this week, I posted the Amazon release of my book and it had already become a bestseller, which you'd think would be like fun and exciting. And it was like, okay. Like there were some comments, there were some likes, but it didn't connect with people in the same way as like authenticity and truth and story and which no expert could have ever told me, oh, this is what you should post. They would have said like, share your reviews, share what people are saying, share that you're a bestseller on Amazon. Like all of these things are the shoulds, and none of those are wrong, but they don't touch people on that deeper level.
No.
And
No. I've
So,
also learned to look out for the word should. In fact, I'm trying to remove should from my vocabulary.
Yes.
I've done a decent job of that so far, but sometimes it still crops up. But anytime something is ever phrased as a should, I view it as a red flag.
Yeah, I agree. Or you have to. That's the other one. When I'm listening to
that's also a red flag.
Business podcast,
Yes.
especially, you'll hear like, oh, you just have to do this. And I'm like, my inner rebel kicks in. And I'm like, sometimes I even have to say like, okay, Heather, is there a kernel of something good in what they just said? But when anyone's like, you just have to, it's like, no. So thank you for bringing that forward. I have one last question that I like to ask all of my guests. Even though we're just starting this whole series of interviews of women in living in grounded wildness, which is, what does grounded wildness mean to you?
I think it means finding the path, either whether it's finding it in the first place or finding your way back to it if you've lost your way from it, to yourself. And not just to yourself, but to a shameless and self-loving and authentic you. And I think in some ways I have never really lost that, because writing has always allowed me to stay in touch with my inner child. And I think our inner child, being in touch with our inner child, is a huge sign, is a really good indicator that we are standing in grounded wildness. And, there were times when I was discouraged away from it, or not that it worked, but that other people would say things, to tell me, nothing's really going to come out of this and whatnot. But I always stuck with it because I loved it. And of course, now I am where I am, and I don't question, and nobody questions that anymore. But while that's nice, the most important thing is that I've always, I think, by being a writer and by continuing to write all my life, that has helped me to stay in grounded wildness. That has helped me to stay in touch with my inner child.
I love it. Thank you. That is the best way to end the podcast. So thank you, Sara, so much for being here. We are going to put links to a few of Sara's poems in the show notes, as well as to her website if you want to check out her coaching, writing services, writing groups, most of which are in person, at least the group aspect. So you can take a look at everything she has to offer on her website. We'll put that link in. And yeah, thank you, Sara, for being here today. And everyone listening, we'll be coming back with one more episode before the holidays, and then taking a couple weeks off, because we all need some time off and some boundaries and relaxation. So thank you all. And yeah, we'll see you next week or the week after. Bye, everyone.